Welcome to What a Creep, the show with Margot Donohue and Sonia Mansfield talking about creeps from the past to the present.
This is your quick guide to the biggest creeps, jerks, assholes, and losers, the best of the worst.
From two nice ladies who want the world to be a little less creepy.
Welcome back to What a Creep. This is Margot Donohue, and you go, girl. With me today is Sonia Mansfield, as always, by the way, my amazing cohort in Creepitude. Hey, Sonia.
Hello, my friend. I give this podcast 2 snaps up.
We're the podcast that talks about creeps from the past to the present. Today, we're talking about an old-timey, creepy murder story. It was murder, you say. But first, I just want to say, if you have ideas, suggestions for creeps and or non-creeps, these are the places you can reach us. We do have a basic Facebook page. We need to warn you, that's the place where people go to complain about our language because we use salty language in this program.
That's right, we do, girl. Fucking yeah. Woo!
You go, girl. We're much more interactive in our, you should read our latest iTunes review to get context for what we're doing. But anyway, we're much more interactive in our Facebook group. So you do have to, it's a private group. You do have to ask to join, but you have to answer just a couple of questions. And we just talk about creeps from the past to the present and what's going on in the news.
Best group
and
on
sometimes you
Facebook.
post. It really is. We really try to keep it that people aren't creepy to each other, that it's a place to just kind of let it all out. Mm-hmm. We're on Twitter at CreepPod because somebody had What a Creep on Twitter and never used it.
Right.
And then we're on Threads, Blue Sky,
Yep.
Instagram,
Yep.
all those places. It's What a Creep Podcast, and our old-timey email. It's whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. Once again, you can send us your suggestions. And also, if you would like some stickers, we are happy to drop them in the mail for you wherever you are on the planet of Earth. Sonia,
Yes.
you go, girl, and tell them about our website.
You can go to whatacreeppodcast.com and it's everything you ever wanted to know about our podcast, but we're afraid to ask. There are links to all of our past episodes. We have like 22 seasons on there. By the way, our seasons don't equal years. We haven't been doing it that long. But
We weren't even born yet.
We weren't even born yet.
Birdie, har, har.
Because we're like 22 years old.
We're Gen Zers.
No, each one of those posts has our show notes because we source every single thing we do. We don't make this shit up. It's all there for you to read. If you're looking for a deeper dive, you could click into those and do a lot of do your own research. No, but like we cover this the best we can, but if you want a deeper dive, that's a great place to start. We also have a link to our Substack where we do a monthly newsletter about like things in the news, give you hints about what's coming. I will be doing that this week. And then we have a link to our merch shop where you can get t-shirts and tote bags and journals and face masks and all of those things. So please go there and check it out. And we have our Patreon page there. But you want to tell them about that, Margot?
Yes, we have our first 8 seasons up on the Patreon wall. We also put out 2 bonus episodes a month. And this is just a way to help us keep the show going. We're not using this to pay our rent, obviously.
Obviously.
But it does help with the basic costs for the show, and especially for all those subscriptions that you and I are dumb enough to pay, I guess, for all the online subscriptions. Anyway, I want to thank Jennifer for joining this week. Thank you, Jennifer. We'll be putting out a bonus episode next week and then one for the week after that. And that's where we kind of just shoot the shit and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Did you also mention the Substack?
I did.
Okay. So we also have that amazing Substack that Sonia puts out
you.
there. And am I forgetting anything, Sonia? Are we able to dive right in?
I think we can dive right in.
Well, first of all, I just want to kind of give background. I had a very interesting call this week with Alicia from Trashy Divorces.
Ooh.
She was on our show as a special guest last summer. I put the link in the show notes where we talked about Truman Capote. Mm-hmm. Is he a creep or is he not a creep? And I thought it made, and we just talked about this case today. And Woodward, Demi Moore plays her in FX Feud, Capote against the Swans or versus the Swans. Mm-hmm. And I have to say, Alicia, because I know she's going to be listening, I think I've changed my mind.
Ooh, I'm intrigued.
So This week, I did a much deeper dive on Anne Woodward. I actually looked up the original on newspaper.com. That's another subscription. But I went to the original coverage for the time.
Oh.
And then followed her over the years. And I'm like, I think I have another opinion.
What?
Yes.
You like read some stuff and then changed your mind? How un-American.
I know.
No, you're supposed to dig your heels in and defend your position no matter what.
Sonia, Toby Keith was just a patriot. What are you talking about?
LOL.
LOL. Any Hoosers. This takes place in Long Island, and the reason I'm just kind of chatting off the cuff a little bit here, but my mother grew up on Long Island. She lived in Great Neck, and she lived like the movie Sabrina. She lived in the little house next to the big house. And it was for the Pratt family. And when this crime we talked about, and it's been fictionalized and spoken of many, many times, but this happened in 1955. My mom's friends, her mother's friends, my grandmother's friends, everybody was either a cook or a maid or a chauffeur or whatever. Those people talk to one another.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rich people. You know that you don't think they talk and they're not talking to you all day?
They're talking
shooting the shit. Yes. And Anne Woodward, who we're talking about today, had a reputation for being very difficult with her staff. That she had very high turnover. She was high stressed. She was just a kind of mean.
Okay.
And the thought was, when her husband was killed, that she did it. And not only that she did it, but that she planned it, or it was murder.
Yes.
And my mom believed this. And I remember watching The Two Mrs. Grenvilles, which was Dominic Dunn's story, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that just gives you just like a little bit of background. But let's go into today's episode. On October 30th, 1955, Billy Woodward was shot in his home, in the home that he shared with his wife, Anne. She told the police it was the case of mistaken identity, as both carried guns to their bedrooms due to a recent spate of robberies in their town of Oyster Bay, New York. Did she kill her philandering spouse, who vocalized how much he had grown to despise her?
Cool.
Anne's eventual acquittal in the case was a Long Island scandal, and actually was in Life magazine. It was like called like the murder of the century. Like we've had like how many of those in America? Like,
yeah, so many murders of the century.
the century.
Yes.
Truman Capote, who had only met her once but instantly disliked her, and apparently she called him the F-word slur.
Yes.
Told a scandalized and very fictionalized version in the 1975's Answered Prayers, which was his first book after In Cold Blood, where if you watch FX, they mention a lot.
I texted Margot because there's a line in the movie where he's just like, he purposely,
Exposition.
where he has to explain. In case you don't know, Truman Capote wrote In Cold Blood, and it reminds me of the scene in Back to the Future where he's like, "Hey Marvin, this is your cousin." Yeah, this is your cousin. Hey Chuck, this is your cousin Marvin Berry, like Chuck Berry. You're gonna want to listen to this. Like it's like so obvious, like what they're doing is cracking me up. Other than that, the show is super enjoyable. Like,
it's wonderful,
so entertaining. But like the very obvious explanation, like I'm Truman Capote. Remember when I wrote Cold Blood? Remember when I
remember me?
It's pretty hilarious.
I will talk about In Cold Blood because I and Truman Capote and In Cold Blood because I'm fascinated by the whole case. It's one of my favorite books.
The book is amazing.
It's a great read.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. His research and the fact that Harper Lee went with him.
Yeah.
And then she won the Pulitzer Prize a year later.
Yeah.
And that broke up their friendship because he was jealous. And he started hanging out with these swans that he called. And these are like Madison Avenue, Fifth Avenue, Park Avenue ladies.
They're like Real Housewives.
They're like Real Housewives, except they have class.
What are you talking about? Well, it's true. Money can't buy you class, according to the Countess.
Answered Prayers was basically a series of short stories, and he was so behind. I mean, he got an advance for this when In Cold Blood came out, it sold millions of copies. It was like whole thing. And he also had the Maisels brothers do a documentary about him, and he was always a great chat on the talk shows, and he loved to meet these women for lunch, but he also had a drinking problem, and he had a problem like he couldn't figure out what to write. You know, he was just drawing a blank every time he tried to come up with something because all he did was hang out with these women.
Yeah.
And then the stories become broader and broader as they go down. The details become murky, and then people treat that as fact.
Right.
And as somebody who's writing nonfiction, like it's very hard to not do that. It's hard to not go into your confirmation bias. And,
Yes.
Or just go salacious.
Yeah, or just starting to like fill in those blanks without getting someone else to fill them in for you with the truth.
Right. And so it became a book that later was published, but it was published first in Esquire magazine. And I believe it was the November issue, 1975. Trigger warnings are murder and suicide. In Answered Prayers, he did a fictionalized version of Anne Woodward and basically hinted that she was a bigamist and a sex worker. She planned the murder. She got away with it because her mother-in-law bought justice. And a lot of people go into that.
I need to ask, are there sources for this? I think we forgot to list them.
Are you ready for my sources?
Yes, I am. Sorry if you were about to get into that. I just wanted to make sure we
That's
did
okay.
it.
Done and Done podcast, of course.
Yes.
That's also co-hosted by Alicia. New York Magazine, New York Times, the book Deliberate Cruelty from Roseanne Montiel. Town and Country, Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar, People, Time, the FX series. There's also The Two Mrs. Grenvilles. There's Power, Privilege, and Justice with Dominic Dunn. I have a YouTube clip. And then there's a show called A Crime to Remember that I adored that did a good episode about this. And a really excellent book called This Crazy Thing Called Love, which came out before the Queen song, I think. She was friends with the son of Anne Woodward's son. So she kind of came from that background. Anne Eden Woodward was born Angeline Lucille Crowell on December 12th, 1915. Her parents were Jesse Crowell, and he was a streetcar conductor. He did a lot of different things. And her mother, Ethel Smiley Crowell.
Ooh.
That was her middle name.
Smiley.
And Ethel was very, very intelligent. She grew up in Kansas, by the way, Pittsburgh, Kansas. Her mother was super intelligent and wanted to be a teacher. But at the time, it was a law. You could not be married and be a school teacher. Right.
Oh my God, that's so weird.
Right. Because they'll think you'll get married, you'll have kids, you'll leave. Like they want spinsters, basically. So she lies. She marries this guy, but she lies about being married to him and starts teaching. And she's so proud. She gets her teacher's certificate. Apparently she was a really good, like a natural teacher. And then she gets pregnant and she becomes pregnant with Anne. And so then she has to quit her job. But while she's raising Anne, her husband's trying to make a living, but he's not very good at it. And then she has another kid, a son. Ethel, there's Elsie and Ethel. Okay. Ethel is Anne's mother. Ethel gets her BA and then gets her master's at night, like going to classes and
very uncommon for the time.
Over the mail. Yes, it was extremely uncommon. And her husband buys this land out in Kansas that's desolate. And he's like, oh, we'll grow something. It'll take 4 or 5 years, but we'll grow something. She's like, all right, I'll move with you, but I have to take these correspondence courses to get my master's. And he gave her a real hard fucking time, which is absurd. It's such a dick move. And it's a case of women, you have to accept your station in life, what your status is. These are the rules. Don't turn the apple cart over. Don't complain.
If she starts learning things, she might learn that there's something better out there. Therefore, she needs to not learn things. Basically,
you don't need no learning.
You don't need no learning. You're a wife now.
And she takes Anne with her. Eventually, her son passes away tragically at the age of 4.
Oh, that's awful.
It's terrible. Anne goes from living with her parents to her grandmother and her parents again. They have fights, then they get back together, they move. Sometimes the mom gets a job teaching at like a one-room schoolhouse. She refuses to teach the indigenous kids. I know. She is a product of her time. But other than that, she's a very smart lady.
Yeah.
And was so intelligent that she offered at her church to give history of Kansas lessons, like the lessons of the history of the state. And people said she was a great talker. And her husband was like, yeah, you can't do that anymore. You're shining a light too brightly.
Yeah. Stop, shimmering, please.
Yes. Yeah, he's dimming her shine.
Yes.
She finally leaves him. And
Good for
she
her.
gets married
You
again.
go, girl.
You go, girl. She tries teaching. It's very hard to find a job. Eventually, she and Anne moved to Kansas City. Ethel, starts her own taxi service out of her house.
Gosh, again, she's very progressive this way.
She is super progressive, and like she could barely drive herself, but she manages all the drivers, and they're all trying to scam her, and they're all like hitting on her daughter, who turns out Anne, who's turning out to be beautiful. Anne is very shy and very intelligent. She loves to read, but she also dreams of show business because 1930s, you're growing up poor in the middle of nowhere, and you look at movie star magazines and you hear about people like Joan Crawford, and look at her now. She's a movie star, and she's from some bullshit town in Texas. So maybe I can make something of myself. So Anne has these pie in the sky dreams, and her mother basically supports her and says to her in 1937, Anne decides she wants to move to New York and try her thing, just do her thing. And her mom gives her $400 in $5 bills.
Nice.
And says to her, go to New York, pursue your dreams. She goes, find something cheap and safe to live in. And she says, also find an inexpensive place to have your meals and go regularly, because those people will notice if you go missing.
Interesting.
Right? Like her mom is thinking.
She was listening to true crime podcasts before it was a thing. That's where I get all my tips.
Anne goes to New York, and by this point, and here's another thing, is that in the show we have Demi Moore playing Anne Woodward. Anne was blonde, and like blondie blonde,
and
blonde.
She's beautiful. You posted photos in the
Gorgeous.
Facebook group. She's gorgeous.
She immediately gets a job at the John Roberts Powers modeling agency. She gets a lot of radio gigs. In 1940, she earns the title of the most beautiful girl in radio. Okay.
That sounds like an insult, actually. I used to do a radio show every couple months when I worked at the newspaper, and someone at the newspaper joked like, well, Sonia has a face for radio. So it kind of sounds like they're being mean, but I'm sure that's not what they meant. Also, fuck
She's
that
beautiful.
person for talking to me like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which editor was that?
There's just fucking
Reveal them, Sonia.
he was a dick. Fuck that guy. Anyway.
She's also a showgirl at a place called Fifi's Monte Carlo.
Oh, I want to go there.
And she's in an act. Yeah, remember?
Yeah.
It's like 3 a.m. when her act is. So she's working all the time. And she meets a man named William Woodward Sr. He owns Central Hanover Bank and Trust. He's the chairman of the company. And he comes in and he sees her, and he's really into horses. So he talks to Anne about, I have these awesome horses and they win all the races. Would you like to go out to our property in Long Island and see them? And she's like, yeah, because she could see money. She's not stupid.
Yeah.
And he's actually really nice. He's kind of dorky and whatever. And they go out a few times, and his wife, Elsie, is suspicious. Be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
As she probably should be.
Yeah. So he has a younger son, William Jr., who's 21 years old, very awkward around women, really handsome. He's like 6'2", buff, athletic, but he's very awkward around women. And his dad's kind of worried, is he not into chicks?
Right.
So he tells Anne, who, by the way, she changes her name. This is important. She changes it to Anne Eden. And she wanted it to be Ava Eden, and then somebody talked her into going to Anne. But her dad is told, the one she has no contact with, by the way, at this point. So he's going to movies and thinks he's seeing, when he sees Eve Arden, he thinks he's seeing his daughter. Yeah.
Because he hasn't seen her in so long, he doesn't know. Got it.
But he does not know. And by the way, I should also tell you, Ethel. I'm sorry, there's so many E words.
Yes.
Ethel Smiley Crowell. She dies when she's 45 years old.
Oh my God, that's so young.
And Anne is making enough money with her gigs to take care of her mom, but she has cancer.
Yeah.
Fuck cancer.
Cancer.
But the last year of her mother's life, she got to live in New York, and Anne got to take care of her.
Okay.
And her mother was like, I don't want you to wind up like me, helpless. And, I'm just lucky that you're able to take care of me. I'm really grateful. She goes, but I want you to find somebody that can help take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also on her mind.
Yeah.
Like, because she gets asked out constantly. Like I
Yeah.
said, she's beautiful. She's vivacious. So he sets her up with his son. And his son is like, boing, really. She's only 5 years older than him. Like,
Yeah.
burp. It's like Cartoon World.
Yeah,
Like his
exactly.
eyes go bugging out. How old is she? So they start dating, and Anne is 5 years older than him. And Anne is apparently really great at sex. I'll just be honest. Like, she apparently knows how to please a man. She enjoys sex. She thinks it's very healthy. And
Yeah, you
normal
go,
and-
girl.
Right?
Yeah, good for her.
I think so too.
Great to have hobbies.
It gives her pleasure.
Pleasure doing business with you.
So she's dating him, and it's 1943, and he's joining the Navy. He has that in him enough to do that. And he's like, oh, I'm going to miss you. He's like, why don't we get married? She's like, that sounds awesome. And they bring it up with his mother, and Elsie is like, no fucking way. This girl is trash.
She's
This girl-
5 years older than you. She's so old.
She's old. Can she even have babies at this point? She's like 26, 27.
Yeah, her
years
eggs
old,
are
by the way.
all shriveled up.
They've flown away. So
Yeah, when you hit 25, that's why Leonardo breaks up with them all.
yeah, exactly. And we should know that the Woodward family is super rich at this point, but they're not amongst the original 400. If you watch the Gilded Age, and
Right.
they have that whole thing about the Woodwards weren't there. So it was
Okay.
in within 30 years, and it's because of her. Basically, she climbed that social ladder.
Okay.
And she was the primo bitch, queen bitch of the whatever at the top. Everybody wanted her at their parties and stuff like that. And she looked at Anne and she's like, there's something shady going on here. Because Anne just like, oh, I don't have parents. I don't have siblings. I just moved here from Kansas City and now I'm doing this and blah, blah, blah. And she just doesn't believe her. So Billy and her, they get married in Tacoma, Washington, which is where he's set to go before he takes off with the Navy. And Elsie doesn't come to the wedding. The father goes to the wedding. But Elsie wants to keep it on the DL. Like she's...
Maybe the wedding had a cash bar. I tend to skip those too. That's fine.
There was only a few people invited. She would want it to be on Fifth Avenue at some really fancy pants place. Right. That's what probably Anne was hoping for. But her mother, Elsie was totally against their marriage, being my point. Like she was totally not into it. Billy goes off to the war. He earns a Purple Heart. He's on a ship that gets shot at. A lot of his friends are killed.
Scary.
It's scary. And he comes home. Hey, Anne, what's up? And they're immediately having babies. Anne, in the meantime, turns out she's super smart and is learning, and Elsie is teaching her everything she needs to know to be a society woman.
Okay.
So she changes her accent. She tones down her laugh. We could always get crap for our laughs, too.
I will never tone down my laugh.
She learns French, and she updates her wardrobe, and she's a natural, she was a model. She knew how to take care of herself.
Right.
And she's becoming one of the best dressed ladies out there, ladies who lunch. And they have a great apartment in the city, and they have this cute little house in Oyster Bay.
Sounds
And
lovely.
It sounds perfect, doesn't it? Billy's getting bored. The whole sex thing, it's great, but he wants strange. He wants something
He
else.
needs new pussy.
He needs new pussy and possibly new dick. There are some reports
all right.
that he might have been bisexual.
All right.
He doesn't
Anne
work.
can't compete with that.
He's not really into working. Like he's known as a
Same.
sportsman. Me too. He's a sportsman and a businessman. He's really into the horses. When his dad dies, he takes over the horse business, and he has a horse called Nashua. And Nashua wins $1 million in prizes in 1 year.
Damn.
This is, so that's like $10 million in today's dollars. So he's bringing in a lot of money with that. He's flying around the world, meeting people in the horsey trade. And Anne goes with him sometimes, and he's really into hunting.
No.
I know.
Gross.
So Anne,
like my dad.
yes, like I thought of your dad. There's a lot of pictures of Anne with like tigers, and like, I know. It's a different time.
Yeah.
But she wanted to keep up with him and his hobbies, to keep him interested in her. The thing is that she molded herself to be the perfect wife so that Elsie wouldn't be embarrassed by her and her husband could be proud of her. But her husband missed the Anne that he knew, that like talked dirty and had an accent and laughed loud and stuff like that. Like he wanted that in high society.
Yeah.
And she's like, but I want to fit in. I want to, you know, if you're the only one doing that, you're going to feel self-conscious like at some point. So she gives him 2 sons. They both love their sons, but she's very high strung and they're both having affairs.
Okay.
And they are both getting their own private detectives to follow each other. It's messy.
It's so messy, and like life is just too short for this sort of thing. I'm like,
and at the time to get a divorce was and people were thinking he wanted a divorce. He did tell her, you know, a few times, I want to split up. And then she would turn on her sexy charms and then he would be like, oh, well, I would miss this, wouldn't I?
There was probably no such, I don't think no fault divorce existed at this time.
No.
This is when like men would start putting their wives probably in institutions and declare them legally insane so that they could get divorces. This was a thing that happened. The money that they would have to pay to get divorced, they didn't want to do. Sometimes it was just trying. And it was really, I don't even know if it was really hard for wives to leave their husbands, if I remember correctly. Like even harder for wives to leave their husbands.
Yes.
Like
Texas was the last state. We talked about this in an episode last year. Steven Crowder is where all of a sudden conservatives were really upset about no fault divorce because they realized women could just go if they want to.
Yes, exactly. I actually have a book that I'm going to start reading soon by Clementine Ford called I Don't. And it's about like marriage, about like the history of marriage and all this stuff. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it. As someone who's recently divorced, this topic interests me.
Well, these two are fighting, and it's a lot of, you know, sex and fighting. It's throwing things at each other. Supposedly, he was violent with her. Supposedly, he was bigger than her. She's not very tall. She's like 5'2", 5'3", maybe.
Like
he's 6'2".
Yeah, he's 6'2" and buff.
He's buff. I mean, she basically knows how to cover bruises on her face and on her arms. She gets very insecure. She's always worried about losing him. She goes on a vacation with another couple and her husband at the last minute drops out. And then she tells the other couple, do you think he's cheating on me? I wonder if he's cheating on me. I'm really worried. Do you think Billy likes me? I don't know if he likes me anymore. And they're like, oh my God, just shut up.
They're like, this is the worst trip ever.
This is the worst trip ever. And one of those was to India, where they went hunting in a town for tigers. Because the tigers were taking over. I know. I'm team tiger, but okay. The person that they were with said Anne was not a great shot. It didn't come to her naturally. I don't know who comes to shooting naturally. I do think it's something you need to learn.
It's a skill like anything else.
It's a skill. Right.
Yeah.
But he taught her how, there's a couple of times where she just like boof, and then like the gun would like whiz by somebody's head and they're like, no, you can't be doing that.
Shotguns have rifles. They have a kick. If you have to be really strong to hold them, or they will kick you back.
And she has guns made for her because she's a delicate lady, and her husband makes sure that she has them. The problem with delicate shotguns, like you don't see them on Fargo. Like John Hamm wouldn't hand a little lady gun on Fargo. It wouldn't look cool, and you're not going to do much damage.
Right.
This is important for later. But she does manage to shoot a couple of tigers, and she poses with them. He's trying to divorce her. Apparently there's abuse going on. Apparently a lot of fighting. People are kind of, the battling Woodwards. They're also really gorgeous and very vivacious, and people notice them when they walk into a room. And so There's jealousy. There's that. They get invited to a party. So let's move it to 1955. They have 2 sons, and they're invited to this house of Florence Tucker Baker, who is hosting the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, who are on my list for potential creep episodes.
Of course you're going to invite this dramatic couple to everything you go to, because let's remember, there was no cable TV back then. People are bored. We're bored. They want to watch. You could watch a real life drama unfold at your party.
Unfolding in real time.
Hell yeah, you're going to invite them to your party and hope shit goes down.
At this point, they're also living in separate rooms. And so they have this 2-story house in Oyster Bay. By the way, the properties there on Oyster Bay are acres and acres of property. So you could go down a very long driveway. Your house could be like people screaming and nobody could hear it. And they have different buildings on their property that are used for different kinds of things. Some people have barns, some people like a full freezer and whatever. So there's a lot of property here.
It's like that Murdoch, like the Murdoch family.
Exactly. So they're right before this party. It's 1955 October, and there's there's a large number of homes being broken into in Oyster Bay, and the security services weren't like they are now. Right. We have ring phones on the door and shit like that. Back then, you're like, get a golden retriever and kind of hope for the best, like
insane. That's
a golden retriever. Excuse me,
yeah.
Don't do shit.
I'm like, that's what
I mean, a German Shepherd. You need somebody that'll
get a Doberman
golden
Pinscher.
retriever. You just bring a frisbee. They're done.
They're like, thanks for noticing me. Yay! Get a Doberman Pinscher. They'll fuck somebody up.
They'll fuck someone up and they'll bark really loud. But like they don't have like a really great security system. And somebody's like walking through the door and just taking shit.
That's really
and
scary.
Also, it's super scary. And you come home and like your fridge is empty or somebody left their food on your counter like they just ate and they took your jewels, and it's creepy. And everyone's talking about it. Yeah, and it's unsettling. So Billy, who's a sportsman, definitely has guns, and they keep them locked in the basement, as you should. Mm-hmm. And he taught his wife, he bought her own shotguns that weren't very, like, once again, it has a lot of kick to it. They were light to fit her little girly frame, but he said, just aim for the eye. Like, if you're just,
All right. That's some news I can use. No, I'm kidding. I don't have a gun here.
Don't say that, Sonia.
I mean, I have all the guns.
Get more German Shepherds.
I do have a dog that'll fuck you up.
Your dogs are loud. They'll scare anybody.
No joke, Max would fuck someone up if they tried to get in
he
their
loves
house.
you.
He's very protective.
They go to this party. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor, who, by the way, abdicated their thrones. They're Nazis. We'll fucking talk about those two.
Fuck Nazis. What a hot take.
I know, exactly. You go, girl, Sonia. The Duke doesn't come down the stairs for the party. He's not feeling well. He ate something that didn't agree with him. So it's the Duchess of Windsor. And Anne is wearing jewels that are similar to her jewels, but they're like really big. Like they're twice as big as what she would wear. And she notices
Mine
like
are bigger
eye
than
roll.
yours.
But it's like eye roll, like, oh boy. There's a big controversy that people said that the husband, Bill, was calling his girlfriend during the party. He had a couple of mistresses, and she freaked out and yelled at him. Not true. He called their house to check on with their cook to see how their sons were doing.
Okay.
But she said in testimony, I was tired and I didn't feel like getting out of bed, so I ignored it. I said, good for you.
Yeah, it's legit.
Boundaries. They come home from the party. He actually brought a pistol with him to the party. Like, he put it in the glove box of the car, but they showed up in their Thunderbird like, oh my God, have you heard about the robberies? There's robberies. I know. What are you going to do? Bill says he's going to shoot them. Bill's just teaching me how to shoot. We're going to shoot the living shit out of anybody who tries to fucking rob us. They're talking about it nonstop at this party. They both are.
Fun. Little party talk, little party chit chat.
I'd be into it. They go home. And by the way, October 30th, 1955, it's a Saturday night. It's when it's the time change. So it's bring forward, fall backward.
Yeah.
So the times get mixed up for people because it's like 2 a.m. it's supposed to change or whatever.
Yeah.
But in the middle of the night, they come home. They each have some drinks. She thought like they had a fun time. So she thought maybe there's some sexy time tonight. And he's like, go to bed, bye. So he goes to his room. She goes to her room. Total buzzkill. And in her room, on her end tables are filled with pill bottles and water and a big ass phone. And Anne has earplugs. Like Anne and doesn't sleep well. I hear you, girl.
Yeah.
She's worried about this. She takes some sleeping pills, has like a beer or something. Like she likes to drink beer.
Oh my
before
gosh,
bed.
I'm feeling very seen right now.
I know. I thought that too.
Put on your
She
eye
liked a
mask
beer and a
and
burp.
go to bed.
Yes. According to Anne, she gets up in the middle of the night. She hears breaking glass. It's windy, it's rainy, it's foggy. Every time like the trees are like banging against the window, it sounds like fingers slashing on the window. Like it's creepy as shit. So she screams out for her husband and she gets her gun. And she says about 18 feet away from her, I don't know how many meters that is, sorry. But she sees a thing. Boom.
Yeah.
She screams and shoots. And she sees the thing drop.
Mm-hmm.
And she runs over and she realizes she shot her husband in the head.
Damn.
And he's bleeding into the floor. And he's like, the breathing's going down really slow and shallow. And she's like, what the fuck do I do? And she's like crying and she's hysterical. And one of the people, the staff that lives there, nobody woke up because of that. Like only he did. The boys didn't wake up. There's other people that were there that nobody
They
wakes
didn't
up.
wake up when they heard a shot, huh?
They didn't hear the shot. They didn't hear her screaming. The boys slept right through it like other people did.
If
So
she
one
was
of the
really screaming.
Well, somebody did. And he came to the house and the door was locked. So he came in through her bedroom window and then found her and she's over her husband. Mm-hmm. And here's another detail, Sonia. She wore her bra to bed every night because she didn't want her boobs to sag. That was one of those salacious things. Like, do you know she wears a bra to bed? I'm like, oh, for God's sake.
I know a lot of women who wear bras to bed and sports bras to bed, and
I do.
Feels good.
It's all cotton, but
Yeah.
it's good.
It feels
I
all
don't want
good
things
to have
flapping.
everybody all locked in and cozy.
I don't want things flapping around. I
Yeah,
wanna,
no.
So Anne's crying. She's freaking out. The police come. Somebody also calls her lawyer, who calls a better lawyer in the city, and a doctor.
Her lawyer's like, I'm going to suck at this. Let's get someone really good.
This is out of my skill set. I need you. Come over. And they all descend upon the house. And I should say this. The people that were with her first in the house, the police, the ambulance that came, everybody, they felt bad for her. They said she was really upset.
Yeah.
Just completely grieving. She's thinking about her sons. She doesn't know what to tell her kids. She doesn't know, like, do I wait till the morning? What do I do? She's like freaking the fuck out.
Yeah. I'm putting myself in her shoes right this second and thinking about she's went to a party where she'd probably been drinking. Mm-hmm. She took sleeping pills.
Yep.
You wake up, you're scared out of your fucking gourd. That must have been terrifying. You know, that was really fucking scary. And
Yes.
like, she's not in her right mind, assuming she's been drinking and taking sleeping pills. Like, nobody's functioning at 100% like that. Girl, I take a Benadryl and go to bed, and then I have to get up at 3 a.m. to walk the dogs. Or not walk the dogs, but let the dogs out to pee. It's an adventure.
Right.
It's an adventure, me walking from my room to the back door. I'm like,
You have been the recipient of texts that I have sent when I've had Ambien. And I'm just like,
but Ambien Margot is so fun.
but I have no idea. Like, I'll look in the, oh my God, I did that. But yeah, I feel the same way. Well, they take the boys to the grandmother's apartment. One of her other sons says to her, he was shot by Anne and he's dead. And immediately Elsie thinks she murdered him. She fucking murdered my son. But we can't let that get out there. So Elsie's like, hire the best lawyers, hire the best doctors. They immediately, here's the thing, where Anne was immediately treated with kid gloves. She's also given a tranquilizer shot by her doctor in the house within like an hour of the shooting.
Yeah.
And then they sent her to a hospital.
Okay, again, booze, sleeping pills, the adrenaline of what she's done, tranquilizer. I would throw up all over the place. That sounds terrible.
I'd be yakking everywhere.
Yeah.
But she goes to the hospital And she's hysterical for like a couple of weeks. Like she's in there a while. She can't even go to her husband's funeral because she's such a mess.
Wow.
The word is like, did she really shoot him by accident? Isn't that kind of convenient? Like she's talking about killing somebody and then she does it like a few hours later.
Sure. Absolutely.
I get it. So the cops start investigating the lead of like, who's been in this neighborhood? Who are these people? And that are like breaking into their homes. And that's when we get Paul W. Worths, who's 23 years old. He is here from Germany. He doesn't speak a lot of English. His father brought him over. This is only 10 years after the war's over. So Germany's like got a public relations campaign problem with this guy.
Yeah.
Because he's going around homes and he starts in the lower part of Long Island, then he realizes in the North Shore is where all the money's at. Mm-hmm. And he like steals cars. He breaks into the horse stables and into the basements and, takes food when he can.
Yeah. Okay.
His whole thing is, I'm just taking what I need. He doesn't take, he doesn't hurt anybody.
Okay.
And they find this guy and they said, were you there when the family, the Woodwards? And he said, yeah, I was there, but I was there on Friday night, not Saturday night.
Okay.
And so they're like, well, we got a guy, but he says he doesn't. So the lawyers start to work him over. Essentially, he does admit to the police, I was there both nights. He thought that Anne and her husband were brother and sister because they stayed in two different rooms.
That's legit. Okay.
He had the hots for Anne, and he thought of her as his girlfriend.
Oh.
And he watched her dress. He watched her do everything.
Creep.
And he said, I went into the house to rob the house and to see her. And as soon as he came in, he broke the glass. Then he heard a gunshot, and he got the hell out.
Okay.
So 3 weeks after this shooting, they go to trial. Anne is put on the stand and they really work her over. Was this really an accident? He was, by the way, I should mention, her husband was in the shower. So she called for him. He just ran out of the shower naked. And then she shot him. Like she just saw this blur, right? Like running. So she was like, what the fuck? So people were saying that Anne must have shot him in the shower, then hired her lawyer, dragged his body over to another part of the carpet, cleaned everything up, replaced the door for the shower, a glass door. It's 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
Like she did all that to cover her tracks.
Sure.
Which makes no sense to me.
Right.
And when they do ballistics, they find out that the gun that she used technically wouldn't kill a person. It doesn't have enough power. The pellets won't do enough. The thing is that the way she shot, it ricocheted and hit into him, and that's what killed him.
Oh.
So it was a buckshot that ricocheted into him.
Yeah, yeah.
And just at a very delicate spot on his head.
Right.
And it exited out the back of his head.
Oh my gosh. Gross.
It's a weird lucky shot. Yeah, it's gross. But the cops, like, it was certified like this. And this man was sent to prison for 6 years. All the people, society people were like, and like my mom said, all the staff, she did it. She did it. She did it. And Anne's already a mess, just very high strung, insecure. This doesn't help.
Yeah. So just trying to make sure I understand.
Yeah, please.
The guy who was breaking into homes, he gets convicted of doing it and goes to prison?
He gets convicted of breaking and entering.
Gotcha. Okay.
She's a kid. That's a good question.
So
he gets 6 years for it, by the way.
Damn.
Yeah.
So, but they decide that it was an accident. That's where they.
It was ruled an accident. It wasn't manslaughter. It wasn't anything else. It was just a terrible accident.
Yeah, but she
has the right to shoot somebody who she thinks is invading her home.
It's also, you could see the other side where he's cheating a lot.
Yep.
She's angry. She also if her story is correct, she called for him and then shot at the person coming at her. It's like, you literally called for him.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't he be coming? There's a lot of reasons for people to think the worst.
It's messy.
Yeah.
Also, Billy was really also into flying, and he wanted to buy an airplane. And it's a helioplane. I don't know what these terms are. It's 1955, and he goes to a place in Pittsburgh, Kansas, which is where she's from, that sells these planes. And he says to her, hey, I'm going to go there. Should I know anything when I go there? Because he's been investigating her. And she's like, no, I'm cool. But she's nervous. He says, oh, I'm just going to look for your mother's grave. I'll leave some flowers. So he goes to Pittsburgh, Kansas, which is the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Sorry to everybody that lives in Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Right. But it is nowhere.
It's the middle of, right. And he finds out that that when she left, she changed her name from Evangeline to Anne, but that also she lost contact with her father in like 1933 or whatever. And so her father, like I said, thought she was Eve Arden, and he lived outside of Detroit.
So random.
So it's so fucking random. He went to see Mildred Pierce, and he was telling people in the audience, do you see that? That's my daughter.
And they're like, sure,
Looks
Jan.
nothing like her.
Yeah.
And she looks nothing like each other. You put them next to each other, you wouldn't be like, oh my God, they're twins. He also told her, Billy told her, I went to Pittsburgh, Kansas to pick up that plane. And you know what? I found out your dad's still alive. What else have you been lying about? And people were saying she would do better off being the widow of him versus being divorced from him.
Yeah.
Which turns out to not be true.
Yeah. He could maybe claim that she deceived him, like claim some sort of fraud, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So when he dies, and as I said, a lot of people said it was better for her financially to be a widow than be divorced.
Okay.
Turns out that's not the case at all. He was worth about $10 million at the time. When he was killed, you have to go by his will. And in his will, he left the money to her and her sons equally. And it was after taxes, and there was like a lot of business stuff they had to take care of. In the end, and I looked at a few different sites at the time, it seems like she got maybe $350K a year. They all did.
Which is,
I mean, I wouldn't laugh at it, but if you think your husband's worth that much more, you think he's worth like mega millions, and then you realize like it's not even 1 million,
right,
or even half.
Yeah,
but she has to accept that. If she had divorced him, she would have had much more,
right?
But what do you know? You don't
know.
And she loved him. She didn't want to divorce him. She wanted them to try to work things out. So Anne is then persona non grata with the society set. They immediately decide that they'll all move in with Elsie in New York. So they get rid of the house. Anne has to live with her, her sons, and then the sons are sent to school in Switzerland. One of them, Billy Jr., they call Woody. Woody does pretty well. He thrives. He makes a lot of friends. He becomes a reporter, and then he runs for office. He gets married. Very well liked. The younger son, Jimmy, was kind of a mess. He grew up with people teasing him that his mother killed his father. She wasn't the most attentive parent.
Yeah.
Especially after the killing, she was just really a mess. She lived all over the world. Elsie told her, go away for 4 years before you even think of coming back to New York. And she said wherever she went, people wanted to know about Mrs. Woodward.
Oh.
And
Right.
She did kill her husband, or did she? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So her drinking goes up. Her pill taking goes up. She has a series of affairs with like younger men. Eventually she comes back to New York and she goes to art auctions. She's really into art, and she buys some beautiful pieces. She sells the Fifth Avenue home. She buys a smaller place. The younger son signs up to serve in Vietnam, and he was already kind of a high-strung person.
Yeah.
Going to combat isn't great for that.
No, imagine that.
And the Vietnam War was, the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
He came home, and he was addicted to drugs. He got it.
Thoughtful.
And so he inherited $350,000 a year at this point, and he's a heroin addict. He comes home a drug addict. He doesn't have any skills. He doesn't, all of his friends went off to do other things from school. They became lawyers or whatever, and he's just hanging around New York City. And he attempts suicide. And then in 1975, Capote's story comes out, and Anne gets an early copy.
Yeah.
And what's not known is who gave it to her. Was it friend or foe?
Right.
Was it someone trying to warn her, like, you might want to disappear again for a while?
Yeah.
Or was it someone taunting her?
Yeah.
Unclear.
Okay.
But she gets it because magazines are printed months in advance. She gets this copy and she starts saying to people, I got to get out of town. I got to get out of town. This, because he paints her as a total floozy
Right.
and just a, a heartless person that killed her husband. All this, salacious stuff about her, a bigamist. And Anne is just mortified because she's just trying to outlive that reputation.
Right.
And she can't. In 1975, she took her own life.
That's sad.
And it was a few weeks before she died by
Right.
suicide. So it was a few weeks before the article came out. She was buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. And I don't think anyone else has noticed this, but I noticed this because I'm a weirdo and I went to find a grave, and you can look up. And Anne Woodward's name is spelled incorrectly. They added an E to her name. It's Anne with an E.
Yeah.
And then E. Woodward. And she's buried there with her husband. So I wonder if that was Elsie's fuck you. 'Cause
Maybe.
Elsie was pissed.
Yeah.
She's like, she murdered my son and now Truman Capote killed her.
Yeah.
I'm done.
That's interesting. Or was it a way of, so that people wouldn't be morbidly searching out her grave?
There's a huge marker for the Woodward grave.
Okay.
They have a huge marker, like a
Yeah.
statue, right? And it says Woodward on the side of
Okay.
it. And Billy's there and Elsie's there,
Okay.
Anne's there. So the fact that they spelled her name wrong, to me, I immediately caught that because my middle name is Anne, but
Right.
it's with an E. And
Right.
when people spell it wrong, I'm like, oh, you didn't really pay attention. Anyway.
Of
So-
course, your middle name is Anne. Everybody's all Gen X women, our names are all of our middle names are Anne.
It has to be, right?
Mine is.
That's yours, right?
Yes, of course it is. Not with an E, though.
See? But there's a difference.
Yeah, there is. Absolutely.
And the fact that her name is misspelled on her tombstone
Yeah.
and nobody could fix that, I was like, that's Elsie being Elsie.
Yeah.
A year after Anne dies, her younger son dies by suicide.
That's awful.
So then she has her older son, and he he was a journalist in Vietnam, got on
Okay.
a motorcycle and
Yeah.
got a camera and was reporting. He worked for the New York Post. He helped start up a magazine in the late 70s.
Oh.
He ran for office as a Democrat. He did some public works. He really tried to be a good example of a Woodward.
Yeah.
In 87, Dominic Dunn writes a book called The Two Mrs. Grenvilles, and it becomes an amazing TV movie. But it even makes Anne look trashier there, and also makes her mother look like. And he writes her as she was this hysterical woman who ran a taxi cab. I'm like, no. That woman, exactly.
Okay.
Dunn had his blind spots
Yeah.
too. In 99, unfortunately, Woody died by suicide.
Oh my gosh.
I know. So
That's so sad.
it's so, I'm sorry. Yeah. it
No,
is
it's just the whole
incredibly
family.
sad.
That's so sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have over the years, there's been this revisit of Truman and the Swans, and everyone always talks about how he hurt all these women. Nobody really mentions Anne's dying. They talk more about Babe Pally, giving him the icy treatment and stuff like that. But he hurt a lot of people,
Yeah.
and he never really took responsibility for it. And Anne was one of those people. When I started going through all the evidence, all I could think, I was like, I could see this totally be an accident.
yeah.
He was 15 feet away.
It could
It's
be.
the middle of the night. There's all these people. Their homes are being broken into.
Yeah.
They're coming home and finding footprints on their doors and inside and stuff like that. People are scared. She's had a few drinks. She had a sleeping pill, maybe even a tranquilizer as well, because she was really hyped up. Her husband didn't want to have sex with her that night, so she's kind of laying in bed oh boy.
Yeah.
And she heard a crash. Paul W. Worths, the 23-year-old that went to jail, in 1964, when he got out of jail, he started sending her love letters because she thought she was his girlfriend.
God.
And then the letters got weird, and he started asking for a ransom of $10,000 because he helped make her famous.
Yeah, thanks. Fucking weird.
She ignored him, but those are the kinds of things she had to put up with
Right.
after all this happened.
Right.
And that is our What a Creep podcast, Sonia. I went in thinking I knew everything.
Yeah.
And thinking I had a very definite, like, oh, she did it. You know,
Yeah.
He was cheating on her. He had it coming. He had it coming. And I've gone away thinking, like, I really feel bad for her. And I think she really was just physically in a not a great state. And
Right.
something terrible happened.
This is, I don't know. I've never heard the whole story before. So this sounds very possible that it could have been an accident to me. But I'm not a cop. I'm not on a jury. And it just sucks that it continued to have that impact in her life and on her kids. That sucks.
Yeah.
That's awful. What a bummer.
Sorry.
No.
But watch the FX show. It's really well done.
It is really
But
well done.
They had last night the Truman's Black and White Ball from 1966, and Ryan Murphy is known for like mixing fact and fiction together.
Yeah.
So in here he has Demi Moore playing Anne Woodward. Once again, she was blonde.
Yeah.
Like that was her big thing. But anyway, he has her attending the party, and it's like not true. She did not go to that party.
Okay. All right. I am one episode behind, but I am really digging the show. I think it's really entertaining.
Oh, it's entertaining and it's a fascinating part of life.
Yeah.
And it's also a story
all
about
those actresses like Molly Ringwald, Diane Lane, Naomi Watts. Come on.
Callista Flockhart.
Yes. So it's
Chloe Sevigny.
yes, it's dope.
It's dope.
Love seeing all these actresses together. More of that, please.
But I also say, like, men telling a woman's story and deciding there's good ones and bad ones.
Yeah.
And then, it's kind of like that's a sore spot for me. So
Yeah. Well, good job, my friend.
I hope it wasn't
I'm like,
too much of a bummer.
do you want to hear about a non-creep?
Yes, please.
Okay. My non-creep kind of has a sad ending too, but he is definitely not a creep from what I've seen. So thank you to our cohort, Thad Powell, for sharing this quote in our What a Creep group, because it kind of sent me on a little rabbit hole on Terry Pratchett.
Oh.
So he shared a quote in our group, and it said, "Satire is meant to ridicule power. If you are laughing at people who are hurting, it's not satire, it's bullying." And I was like, I know who Terry Pratchett is. I have not read any Terry Pratchett. I am now interested in reading some Terry Pratchett because I did a little research. But if you don't know who he is an English author, a humorist, a satirist. He has written like 41 like comic fantasy novels. The big one is called Discworld. And then he did Good Omens with Neil Gaiman. Is that how you pronounce it? Gaiman? Yeah. Which I haven't watched yet. There's a series on Amazon Prime, and I've been
Gaiman, I think.
Gaiman. Okay.
Or Gaiman?
I'm sorry, everybody. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I could spell it for you.
Go, girl.
He has sold over 100 million books worldwide in 43 languages.
Me too. Just kidding.
He's been knighted. He's won like a million like book awards. I couldn't even possibly list them all here. It's like too many. He has 10 honorary doctorates. He has an asteroid named after him. He is just like this really interesting dude. Like, he did an interview in 1995 with Bill Gates, and like the internet was like starting up in 95. And he said, like, "I'm really concerned about the potential spread of misinformation online." And he was worried about like people were being like Holocaust deniers, and they're like presenting it at the same level as like peer reviewed research.
Yep.
And he's like, "How do we gauge this?" And Gates is like, "I disagree. I think people are gonna, fact check and blah, blah, blah." And the interview was like rediscovered in 2019. And people are like, this dude's talking about fake news. And he's talking about it from 95. And he's just this I think he's a fascinating person. Like, he's always been really into like natural history. He had like a greenhouse and it was filled with like carnivorous plants, and which I'm like, what? Like,
Ooh.
yeah. And he's like, I don't
Like in Little Shop of Horrors,
and at a
the
certain
Audrey
point,
too.
he was like, I don't even go in there anymore because it's like overrun with carnivorous plants. He like
Nice.
he started a foundation for orangutans, which I was like, what? Like, it's just so cool to me that he would do that. He was really into astronomy, which is why the asteroid is named after him. He built his own observatory in his backyard. He grew up like really religious in the Church of England, you know, kind of thing. And then later he would describe himself as an atheist and a humanist. He one time he did this interview and he said, like, I read the Old Testament and he's like, I was horrified. And then I read the New Testament and thought that Jesus had a lot of good things to say, but I could never see the two testaments as one coherent narrative, which I just thought was like a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
In in 2007, he had what they thought was a stroke, and then it was misdiagnosed. It was actually early onset Alzheimer's. And at that point, he became like a really big advocate for Alzheimer's research, which I know people could argue is like, well, that's for himself, right? But I think,
Oh yeah. No, I wouldn't think that.
no, but also like, that's when he realized that like there wasn't a lot of money being donated that way. Like, it was mainly cancer research, which fuck cancer. Like, those are good things to donate to. And he became like really outspoken about that. Like, he donated a lot of money to it. He did some like a bunch of documentaries about like what it's like to live with Alzheimer's, to like raise awareness of that, to like for people to see the signs of this sort of thing. He died in his home. He was only 66 years old.
Aw.
And I should also mention, like, he was also really like an outspoken advocate for the legalization of assisted suicide, but he did not die by assisted suicide. He actually died of natural causes, so that didn't happen. But he did think it was something that people should be able to do if they want to do that. I have mixed feelings, but it's not my business. I really want to read some of his books now because, by the way, people who read Terry Pratchett fucking love Terry Pratchett. They love him. Like, his name has been thrown to me many times as something that I would super love. And so if you are interested in reading some Terry Pratchett, I did some research of what are like the go-to books that people should read. They said a good place to start is his book called The Carpet People from 1971. And it's about like a society of people who live on a carpet, basically. Hence the Carpet People. He also did...
Are they afraid of vacuums?
I hope so. There's a book he did called Going Postal. Good Omens, of course. The Color of Magic, Mort, Small Gods, and then there's one called Guards with exclamation points. He just, in every interview, like, seems like a delight, a really smart person who like put humans first, hence the humanist in him. An advocate for like trans rights before it was like super vocal. Like, his daughter, like, recently a anti-trans group tried to like come out and like claim Terry Pratchett as one of his own, and his daughter was like, you should read his books. Like, that he was definitely not like that. And one of his books was called Snuff, and there's this line in it that I just love. It says, goodness is about what you do, it's not who you pray to. And I just think it's really, really smart. He seemed like a delightful human. So thank you, Thad Powell, for the rec in our Facebook group. And that's our non-creep, Terry Pratchett.
That's a great non-creep, Sonia, and thank you.
Thank you.
If you like the sound of our voices, and by golly, if you made it this far, You go, girls. We also co-host a podcast called Dorking Out, where we dork out about movies. Sonia, what are we going to be dorking out about next?
Yeah, speaking of Demi Moore, we're going to
Yes!
be talking about. It's not a movie where you're like, I'm going to watch a Demi Moore movie, but she's in it. We're going to talk about A Few Good Men from 1992. I love a good courtroom drama. I think this is going to be super fun to talk about.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
That's going to be hilarious. As Sonia mentioned, we do take suggestions from our listeners, either on social media or via email. All of those places I mentioned at the top of the show. We love it when you use the Annie Potts GIF We Got One as your notifier, but you could pick anything you want.
Yeah, you do you.
You do you, booze. We are at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com. Let us know if you want some stickers. And Sonia, where can they find you?
You can find me at thesoniashow.com and The Sonia Show on all the social media channels, the Twitters, the Blue Skies, the Threads, wherever you are. I'm there too, like a creep. Where can people find you?
You're like Daniel
Margo?
Day-Lewis.
Yes.
Whatever you are.
I will find you. No, just stay alive no matter what occurs. I will find you. Where can people find you, Margo?
I'm at Brooklyn Margo on Twitter, on TikTok. That's where we post videos for our Dorking Out show and a couple of other things. And I'm at Brooklyn Margo also at Blue Sky. I'm at Brooklyn Fitchick is my site, and I'm at Brooklyn Fitchick for Twitter and Instagram and Threads. Okay, y'all. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. You go, girls, and just stay safe. Don't be a creep.
Thank you for listening to us talk about creeps. You can follow us at What a Creep Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
But don't follow us too closely.
You can email us your creepy stories at whatacreeppodcast@gmail.com.
But please keep your dick pics to yourself.